Hey YouTube, Twig here, bringing you all an update to my Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck collection for 2024. I have done a good amount of these Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck collection videos throughout the years. They've always been a fun way just to show what my current collection of Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks consist of. Now, these are decks that I keep in deck boxes. I do have, deck skeletons, cores all over the place as well, but these are more or less, completed decks that may just need a couple staples here or there to be a playable, deck to use. But, you mix staples here and there. I really don't, think a person should have, hundreds of copies of Ash Blossom and Joy Spring and Infinite Impermanence for each one of their decks. But if you do, more power to you. It's just, when you have the one deck you want to play, you use them for that specific deck. I think I have at least a couple, dozens of each one available. But as always with these videos, I was going to show all of the decks that are in my current collection for the year 2024. Usually like to, upload one of these once a year, and just finally got around to another happy position with the decks that I have, having close to, I think, 40 to 50 decks for this video. So let's go ahead and get started. With no particular order, I'm just going to open a deck box and see what deck we have to work with. Starting off is actually one of the newer decks for my collection, and that is Flower Guardians. Now, when I say newer decks, I mean like one that was in a core or like a binder for a good while as just a deck skeleton. And I do apologize for some of these being in order, some of them not. If they aren't in order, it means I've recently played the deck also, so I have recently played it. Flower Guardians are always fun to me just for the fact that it's a very simplistic deck, just, summoning out your many different Flower Guardian synchros using the 4 Flower Guardian monsters that you summon onto the field. I've also done a video on this one recently, so after, normally with my videos when I make them, if I want to, keep the deck, then it normally stays in a deck box. Otherwise, once I'm done with the video, it goes back into one of my binders for the deck skeleton for another later date. But I decided to keep Flower Guardians in a actual deck box this time around, and it shows because you don't really want to use too many staples with the Flower Guardians, since they most of the time, just end up using a majority of Flower Guardian cards in the deck anyway. All right, next deck, and I do have a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc 5 decks, the next one being DDDs. Once again, I also love decks that just have a good variety of extra deck cards that pertain just to that one deck, because then they can stay with it. There aren't too many other decks that use particular DDD cards. There may be some other decks that, use cards like Wave, High King, Caesar, but then I'll just take this card out and put it into that deck. But DDDs also are another fun deck of mine. They just have so many different combo plays for the many different extra deck monsters that you can summon out, which is why I like them. And if you see some extra sleeves at the end of the decks, these are just extra side deck sleeves in case I ever want to, play the deck a little more competitively or at a locals. So then I have the extra sleeves available with them as well to be able to use for the side deck engine. We're just going to go right down the order that I have them placed. Next up, we have the Neospatian deck. Now, this one I have mixed in with Yubel, Rainbow Dragon, you name it, a bunch of different cards as well, and have the Air Neos also, which I think is very, very awesome, because then I can go for the full Neospatian package for all the different monsters to summon out. And this was another recent one that I've used for the deck updates, but still another one that I do love to play. I was always a fan of GX and Jaden's many playstyles, especially when he could make the Neospatians and the different elemental heroes. So one I always like to keep close to me and update with different variants. I think the most recent variant was actually the Chrysalis deck, but not the main deck that I use for it altogether. Up next, we have another Pendulum deck, and that one is my Cliffort deck. I have 5 extra deck cards when I think I do run cards like Pot of Extravagance in the deck, but when I use that card, I always just, add additional extra deck cards, regardless of what they are, because you're not really making too many different extra deck monsters for your Clifforts. But this was one of the first Pendulum deck, and I think I have maybe 1 or 2 cards missing. If not, they just might be an extra sleeve from the side deck sleeves, or yep, I think I just have the 1 sleeve there mixed in for Sacrifice as well. But this was my first Pendulum deck that I ever ever made. It came out in New Challengers when it was one of the actual first, archetypes for pendulums, and I wanted to give that a try, and I had a lot of fun using full power pendulum at that, compared to other people who were still using, fusion decks, Shaddolls at the time when the New Challenger set came out. We also have another one similar in release date to the Clifforts, and that is Satellar Knights. These cards came out in Duelist Alliance. We have plenty of support and some new support. I think, new support has been added into the deck since the last update. I say that, and I don't have the Xyz monster in here because I was using it on the decks, but we did get some new main deck monsters as well that allows us to use some of the Constellar support with the playstyle as well. But I like this deck also for the fact that you don't really use traps in a good variety of decks as a major strategy, but being able to use cards like Fiendish Chain, Crackdown, Call the Haunted in this deck to make use of your different Xyz plays, and I have one of the extra Satellar Knight cards there, makes this deck fun because you can use cards like Satellar Knight Trevor, and also with Trevor, it was a very funny game that came up. I was playing against Exodia using this deck, and they had all 5 pieces of Exodia, and I thought just to troll, I would summon out Trevor. This would bounce every card on the field back into the hand, so I bounced all 5 pieces of Exodia back to my opponent's hand. There was no other way for me to win. I knew I was going to lose the next turn, so at least I went out on my own terms and, gave it so my opponent had the 5 pieces of Exodia in their hand to use. I thought it was very, very funny using this deck. All right, since we have the last one in the row, another favorite of mine that I have updated plenty of times on the channel, and that is Laval's, or Laval Quasar, because it does use the Quasar engine in the deck as well. And we had some new cards like Heat of the Fire Chandler added into the deck as well for added fire support. But the main play here is the synchro usage of some of the other generics we use with Rekindling with our Laval monster, setting up Molten Conduction Field, Rekindling in the graveyard, being able to summon them back, and then just go for big synchro plays. And I really do love the fact that we have cards like Prosperity more readily available, because it definitely does help with added search for specific cards that you might need in the deck also. All right, so I think I have like 5 to 6 rows, and that was actually like the shortest one with only 6 decks in that row. But going on to the next one, and this one is actually the deck I've been using the most recently at Locals. I wanted to be the villain for a couple weeks at Locals while we wait for the ban list. And, as of when I upload this, there might have already been a ban list for post, August 2024. But until then, there's just so much meta. There's Snake Eyes, Yubel, you name it, the works. So I wanted to run something just to kind of combat those decks. I've been playing Salmon Greats, Marine Cess, Madolches, but they just weren't cutting it with just how strong the meta was. So, played the little bit of Runic Stun, and, I'm having fun with it. I hate to admit it, but, it is a pretty trolly deck to use. So this is the most recent deck that I'm using at Locals. As you can see, I have the side deck here as well for me to use, but here is the deck that I have been, as I said, a villain with at Locals for the past couple weeks. I think if I do decide to use it at the next one, it may be the 4th or 5th time as we wait, as I said, for that ban list to update us on what we can do for our future decks, which after that happens, I definitely will be changing decks. I want to play something new, something fresh, just waiting to see what the ban list will do to change those numbers. All right, next up, we have Fluffles, going back to New Challengers. Now, Fluffles have always been a favorite of mine. I have so many different high-rarity Fright Fur monsters in this deck. And once again, it's another deck where you can keep the majority of cards in the extra deck because they all stick with this deck and don't really get used too much in other decks. This was another one that I used recently. I think I have the Infinite Impermanence playset missing from this one and maybe a couple Ash Blossoms here and there. But I just really like fusion summoning with the different plays. I was a really big fan of Arc 5, and as I said, I wanted to make a bunch of different Arc 5 decks, so Fluffles were definitely up there as one of the first decks also to hit some pretty big popularity on the channel, so always happy to update this deck also whenever I can. Maybe we'll see some new support later down the road as well for it. and another deck from the Yu-Gi-Oh! Vrain series this time around. And I have some of the sleeves missing. Let's fix this real quick. One of them missing off of the Arrival Cybers at Ignister. And that is the Ignister deck used by I in the final season of Yu-Gi-Oh! Vrains. With this one being, I would say, more of a generic lineup of just the many different, Ignister cards that we can run in the deck with some added Cyber support and then the extra sleeves here. I used to keep them in separate boxes, but then I decided, there's enough room in the deck boxes. Let's just, keep all the extra sleeves that we would need for them if I decide to do side deck, or if any of the sleeves get damaged, I don't have to go searching too far. I know where those sleeves are for the deck that I'm currently using or playing. And what do we have next? We are right back to Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc 5 with Yugioh's deck this time. Because Yugioh definitely used Dante Traveler of the Burning Abyss plenty of times here. And for this deck, it is once again just a sort of, mix more pure Phantom Knight with a small Burning Abyss engine. Now with the Megatons right around the corner, I may turn this into a full Horus deck. Maybe a little easier with Mseti. I guess we'll have to see how short that card will be. Hopefully it's a pretty easy secret rare, because I do find that, when I used it, I think I did 1 or 2 locals where I made Phantom Knights, Sarcophagus, and just one of the more powerful decks for the graveyard setup that you can provide for that also. But Phantom Knights have been one that I've used for a good while also. And the same goes to another fusion deck of mine, and that is Gem Knights. Gem Knights were one of my favorites from the Dual Terminal storyline. I just loved the aesthetic, and I admit it, there were days where, college lectures were going on, and I would just sit in and look at the amazing arts that were getting revealed for the Gem Knight cards at the time. I would see these fusions. I was like, that looks so much like polymerization. I want to build this deck. I love the design of Gem Knight Obsidian and just the overall play style of it as well. Plus, we have these awesome fusion monsters, which are, my apologies, upside down, that you could go into and have some pretty generic ones to be able to use also with the deck. I'm getting some big nostalgia the more I look at all of the decks lined up as once. Now, another one, this one, I would say is my favorite because I am a bigger Yugi fan than I am a Kaiba fan, and that is the Dark Magician deck. Now, this one is one that I've, loved updating deck profile-wise. It's one that I've had for a good while. Some that, I may want to upgrade some of the rarities for some of the specific cards in the deck, and some of the extra cards are mixed around here and there for them. I think Dark Dragoon is currently still with the Buster Blader deck, since it was one of my more recent deck updates, but still, I want some of the more max rarity cards mixed in throughout the deck as well, because this is just one I have a lot of fun deck profiling. We've had recent releases for Magician Souls. As you can see, I have one of each of the different rarities from the Rarity Collection 2 for this deck also, but compared to Blue Eyes, I'm definitely a much more of a Dark Magician fan than I am of a Blue Eyes fan. I still like Blue Eyes, and while we're at it, we'll just go right next to that deck. And this one's actually getting support, so I'm definitely happy that I still have this deck to be able to, get ready for that support. You don't know what's going to be in the structure deck. Hopefully a good majority, so people that want to play Blue Eyes can do so. The fact that we're getting a Blue Eyes Link monster is pretty awesome, because we got a good number of fusion monsters and synchro monsters, but when it comes to, Link monsters, that seems like an engine that can definitely be done right in the Blue Eyes deck. All right, up next, and this one is one that people have been wanting me to trade cards out of for a good while, and that is the Fable deck. I definitely need to get some more sleeves for the extra deck. I mix and match so many, but a lot of times when there are some sleeves missing for the extra deck, it means the cards either, the sleeves got damaged and I just need to replace them. But the Fabled lineup, now these Luries here, people have been wanting me to move them for their Fiendsmith decks, and I'm like, sorry, I can't do it. They gotta stick with the Fableds because that is what they are meant to be used in, and I'm definitely very, very happy with that playstyle. Will I ever add Fiendsmith into this? Maybe when it becomes a little more affordable. I'm not looking to play Fabled in a competitive environment anytime soon, so I guess I'll just have to stick with the pure Fabled for the time being. But still, another very fun one you could potentially get Quasar out in as well. So I always find myself mixing the Quasar engine back and forth between Levels and this deck all the time. Now, sticking with the theme from GX again. We have the Destiny Heroes. Now these are pure Destiny Heroes, and with these ones, more of a, like I said, pure engine for the Destiny Heroes with some Vision Heroes, which I think is fine because, Aster Phoenix did use the Vision Heroes in the manga, and that's a big thing when I go for my pure play styles for decks. If the character used them, then I find it all the more justified to be able to use those cards in the deck as well. Now, going back to Arc 5 again, did I say Arc 5 when I mentioned the, Aster Phoenix deck? I meant GX. If I didn't say GX, I meant GX. Now, back on Arc 5, as you can see, I have Super Heavy Samurai Scarecrows in here, just because I am awaiting that day we get something back for this deck. The fact that it was used as an engine seems unfair to me. The Super Heavy Samurais were always a deck that, just was more meant to be a fun synchro deck. You could do things like Battle Ball using your opponent's monsters for the synchro, special summoning out some easy tuners, copying your opponent's spell and traps with Susanoo, you name it. And then we got this added support from Cyberstorm Access, making the deck all the more powerful, but sadly had to suffer by giving us our Link monster a ban on the ban list. And up next, back to another Vrains deck. Now, this is one I've actually used at locals for a good while. That's why it is pretty shuffled up, and that is Marincess. I was always a fan of the Marincess engine, and actually, I think I'm just a fan of playing Cybers in general, because along with Marincess, I was always playing Salamangreats as well. I just like the, Link-style playset that you could do with these decks. And as I said, I have a good majority of the staples in this deck as well, because this is a deck that I have used recently. And you can kind of tell because the sleeves are getting a little grimy on them, and it definitely does bug me a lot. So this and Salamangreat are two decks that as soon as my locals restocks on sleeves, I have to go buy the proper colors, of course, orange for Salamangreats and blue for Marincess. Which, while we're at it, let's just jump right to the Salamangreats as well. You can definitely tell with these, I think the only staples I took out of here, they probably are the, no, the impermanences are right there. Maybe they're the Nibiru's and the Ash Blossoms. Nope. So maybe the triple tact. Now this is a true mystery here, but you can see there's a little bit of grime, which grosses me out right now. But I haven't even played Salamangreats, so I couldn't justify getting new sleeves yet until I played the deck again. But we also got the new added support for the deck. I don't think I've showed this deck collection update since I've gotten the Raging Phoenixes and the Salamangreats of Fire for the deck. But I've loved playing this deck. It just sadly, in my opinion, it can do well at locals. It just sadly can't compete with some of the other fire decks that are out currently in the meta also. We still got a good number of decks to go through, but we'll move right along with the next deck being Morphtronics. Now, this is another one that I've been a big fan of ever since I saw Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds. When I saw Leo using the different Morphtronic monsters, some of them in defense, getting their different card effects, attack position, he wasn't the best with the deck, but he did make it look like a lot of fun. And we've had new support throughout the years with new forms of Power Tool Dragon, Morphtronics getting their own synchro, and plenty of new extra deck cards for the deck to use also. Revolution Synchron being a big addition to help with summoning out cards like Power Tool Dragon. It's just been a really fun deck for me to use, and as I said, you never know what you're going to summon off of Self-On either. Next up, this one was actually a deck gifted to me. I don't use it often. It is the Gagaga deck. I think it was given to me in a trade at one point just to kind of like sweeten the deal for the trade, but it had cool cards like Gagaga Head, which I don't think has even been, reprinted since it was the manga promo, but still very, very awesome there. And it's more of just a pure Gagaga deck using those different engine cards along with the Gagaga extra deck monsters, which you can see right there. There's one of them, Gagaga Samurai, and then this is the big tell that it was a trade because we have all the additional, I think these are at least a playset of every other additional Gagaga card along with some of the other ones in the deck. Also, some of the other extra deck cards that are missing in the deck are more than likely with the Utopia deck, which I opened a random deck box thinking it would be Utopia, but nope, it is Performapal. So we'll just move right along to the Performapal deck. Got a couple extra deck cards here. The other ones are more than likely with the Supreme King Zark deck. But Perform Pals were, once again, they were the first Pendulum deck that I tried to make work on the channel. But, you know, like, they just didn't have enough Pendulum cards. I wanted to do the deck update for it, and we were just working with cards like Twist Cobra and all that. But I've always liked updating the Perform Pals. You know, if there were ever new cards in a set to come out, you can guarantee that I was updating the Perform Pal cards with them in as recent of a video as I could. Another new deck recently added to the collection is Lightsworns. This is one that's pretty much built fully together, and with that, these are actually just some extra sleeves there because I was playing the deck recently here. But with those added cards, the Lightsworn deck that I put together is more of a pure build to work with the setup of your Punishment Dragon and your Judgment Dragon with some small, you know, cards that if they're milled or can use the banishment for extra cards, then you have the power to use with Punishment Dragon and Judgment Dragon, and getting out their fusion monster Enlightenment Dragon has always been a lot of fun when you can successfully do it again. But all the plenty different Lightsworn monsters that we run as well, and as I said, the extra sleeves along with some of the other extract monsters that were left behind there at the end. But this was one that was also a deck skeleton at one point, but wanted to finally just keep it as a deck once I had everything from the newest set to use in it also. Now, this one's more or less one that has to be put back together again. It's missing some cards, so I guess technically this isn't a full deck for the video, but I kept it in the deck box. And when I do that, if there are cards that are missing a good majority of the deck, that is because I either, you know, move the cards to a friend, move the cards to someone who wanted the deck more than me, and I thought, okay, one day I will get the cards to rebuild it, and I need the Fire Fist Elephants and the Pandas to fully rebuild and reuse Fire Fists again. But when I have a deck that seems to be missing a good majority of the cards for it, I keep it in the deck box because I feel like if I take that deck apart, put it in a binder, and forget about it, then I will never get the deck built at that point. A lot of the cards that are in the binders are, you know, complete. They're just not put together for me to use in decks more recently. But with the Fire Fist deck, that's a different story. I don't want to forget about this deck. It was always a favorite of mine. I love the Leopard Spirit play with the Synchro Summons, so that is why I kept it together to one day rebuild. We do need reprints for, you know, Elephant and Panda, though. All right, next up is Crystal Beasts. I believe this is the pure variant. I took apart the Advanced Crystal Beasts since the last update because I do still enjoy just using the pure version of the Crystal Beasts compared to the Advanced Crystal Beasts. The Advanced Crystal Beasts are just a lot more selective with their playstyle. They're too reliant on the field spell. It's just much more risky for me to use when summoning out monsters. Here is another Arc 5 deck, which if you haven't noticed yet, I have all of the Yugioh Dimension counterpart decks, including Speedroids for Yugioh. So this is another fun synchro deck. It has more or less, you know, just a one-card playstyle setup, and that is to summon out your, you know, Clear Wing Synchro Dragon, then get out your Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon, or some of the other bigger Speedroid Synchro monsters. We also have, I grabbed this deck not thinking that it would be right in a row, but I figured if we're going to finish off the Yugioh Dimension counterparts, we might as well, because we've already seen Yugioh, we've seen Yugioh, and then we're finishing off with Yuri and his Predaplants. All four of them just had very, very awesome decks, had to build all four, and I'm very happy that I've been able to keep all of them. They've gotten recent support, I think Predaplants being one of the more recent compared to the others, which is surprising because we, you know, had this support back in Dimension Force. This is when we got, you know, cards for Yugioh also, but we really haven't seen much support elsewise for any of the decks since then. And moving right along, another one. Now this is one I really tried to make work at locals. This just seems like a deck that people had plenty of answers for, and that one is Trap Tricks. It's a big back row setup deck, and you just have to really know the play style of what you're trying to do with this deck when you go up against your opponent. It's still a fun deck, don't get me wrong. You have that easy setup of your Link 1 Trap Trick Sarah. It's just one that, you know, once I feel the back row is gone, you just feel more, you know, at risk with the deck, and that's when you end up losing. If you don't have your back row with Trap Tricks, maybe I was doing something wrong with the deck, but that's just how I feel about it altogether. Now, this is one that, you know, maybe we'll see some newer support in the future as well. I have some extra deck sleeves missing for this deck, and this is another one that I guess you could kind of compare to Fire Fist, which I'm sad that that is the case. They're just, you know, been friends that have wanted to build the deck more than me, so I parted with some of the cards away from it. I love Rockets. I always love updating Rockets on the channel. It is a fan favorite from Vrains as well, with it being, you know, Revolver's go-to deck with its power play style and its many different extra deck summons that you can do with it also. And for the next one, just trying to see and go through the best order for everything. But we also have Sky Strikers. Now, this is one I'm surprised I kept together. But once again, this being a deck where the majority of the cards are these Sky Striker cards. And then just a couple small stable spell engine that wasn't really being used much elsewhere. So I decided, you know, it can stay as a deck altogether. Now, I'm not too big on moving cards from my deck collection. I also left an extra Upstart Goblin, but I could feel Sky Strikers if I had to trade a full deck. As I said, I've traded parts from the Fire Fist and the Rocket deck to friends and all that, but if I had to trade away a full deck, I would say Sky Strikers from the whole collection would definitely be one I could see going. It's not a deck that I enjoy playing too much. It's just one that I have, one that, you know, if a friend needs a deck to borrow at locals, one that I'd more than likely lend out to them. Here is the counterpart in where most of the extra deck cards for the Gaga deck are, and that is the Utopia deck. This was one that I was thinking about updating recently. We did get that new Utopic Ray Lancer. I guess it's a combination between Utopia and, you know, Black Ray Lancer. So it could see some needed support to be used with this deck also. So could be potentially one to update as well in the future for the channel. But once again, one that I do want to get a third Ultimate Utopia for the deck. I think I only have the two. Is there a third Utopia even with this lineup? Looks like I only have the two. I might have the normal one, but we also saw that we're getting Utopia double in the tin. So for those looking to build Utopia, definitely the best chance to get on that for sure. And for the next deck box, I can't remember if I had Watts built or not for the last deck collection video. We did get new support in Age of Overlord for this deck, but since then, you know, I've kept the deck together. It's very control. You can see when the last time I updated this deck, because Goes in Match is definitely no longer at 3, but it was one that I was definitely using at 3. So since Age of Overlord, we've had that update, but still kept the deck together. So this could definitely be one that's also in the lineup for a potential update on the channel. All right, we are winding down. And when I say winding down, we have about 15 decks left to go for. Like I said, we've been going through a good number, but we still got a pretty good chunk left to finish off. I said Infernoids. Infernities are another one that are just missing some staples. As I said, I mix the staples back and forth between the decks, and not hand traps, just staples that I like to use in the deck as well. This is one I actually got from a friend. It has some pretty high rarity cards for the Infernoid deck, so always like to keep the decks that I get from friends together as well. If I sell a deck that I got from a friend, I just don't feel right. If I, you know, I'm given the deck from a friend, then I like to keep it together. Otherwise, it's just that deck, you know, unless I get the permission from them to sell the deck. Raid Raptors are another Arc 5 deck that I have a lot of fun playing as well. They got new support. I feel like that becomes a broken record, but Phantom Nightmare, we got some pretty awesome Raid Raptor support, especially. So definitely happy with this deck and its playstyle. The Skip Force was always my favorite move to do with the deck. Just being able to skip 2 ranks for a monster and count that as a summon, along with the last Strix play to summon out are rank 8, and then just go into the Ultimate Falcon, all the more easier. It still is one of my favorite plays to do in the deck. And for another Vrains deck, and that is my Cybers deck. It could be Code Talker, it could be Firewall, whatever I am feeling for the time being. I think this one's more built in the Firewall playstyle with, you know, a little bit of Code Talker mixed in. They're both really, really strong Cybers engines to use. I saw we're getting a new Cybers deck in one of the new deck builder packs, so it'd be cool to see if it can be mixed or matched with some of the Cybers support as well for that future video. And up next, we have another one. I said, Sky Strikers would be a potential deck that I could trade. I guess you could say Altergeists are another one in that same lineup. It's just not one that I was a big fan of, but one of those decks that, you know, I just realized I gathered up all the cards for it. A deck that I can see myself moving to someone who, you know, wants to get in on the game and just have something a little more new to play with at locals also. Now, this one is another one of my favorites. The playstyle is one that I don't enjoy in Duel Links, but one I do enjoy in actual, you know, TCG Yu-Gi-Oh! And that is Amazonas. With all their different fusion monsters, you definitely have a fun playstyle that never gets old depending on what you summon out onto the field. Amazonas have been my favorite since we got them in the first Duelist pack for the newer wave of support, and one that I'll definitely want to keep together. I think I even got some higher rarity cards in the later speed duel sets, so if I can get those to update the rarity of some of the cards in the deck, I'll definitely want to do that also. All right, up next we have Chronomalies, one of the other Zexal decks that I've kept together, just missing a couple staples here or there for the deck, but other than that, tried to go for more of a pure variant with this deck. Now, one I do want to rebuild. Hopefully I'll have it rebuilt, but, you know, it's just been a big meta crazed deck is Gimmick Puppets. That one's currently in a deck skeleton, but another one of my favorites. I would even say I think Gimmick Puppets are more fun than Chronomalies currently, especially with the new support we got from the Infinite Forbidden booster set. Red Dragon Archfiend is another 5Ds deck. I think I have Yusei, Leo, and Jack Atlas for their decks. I do want to rebuild Black Rose Dragon one day and, you know, potentially get all the Signer Dragon decks. I'd have to figure out what I could build for Luna, but if you want me to attempt an Ancient Fairy Dragon deck on the channel, that could definitely be one I end up keeping if I like the style of the deck as well. Now, one of my favorite decks on the, you know, for the whole game, it's been on my top 10 Yu-Gi-Oh list for my favorite decks when I hit 50,000 subscribers, and that is Gishkis. This has won me a Battle City tournament, so it's always, you know, retained that memory in my heart for winning me that entire tournament, giving me the Ojama Battle City playmat, and one that I will always keep together. I've even got the added updated support for them in the deck, so always one that I like to at least keep close to home when going through my different decks. Now, another one that is new to the collection, and I don't know why. Some of these cards are just out of the sleeve. I have to re-sleeve them and then get back to that, and that is Magispectors. I actually was surprised that I had a good majority of the Magispector cards as well. Once again, just some staples missing here and there for this deck. I have so many Pendulum decks that a lot of the staples for those decks get mixed and matched, and then they're in one deck and then just not the other, but just a pure variant on the Magispectors, and I kept the deck together because I had the cards for a good while in, you know, just a binder, and then when the new support came out, I was like, hey, I have the deck, and let's might as well just build it and keep it together. And for this one, I think I still have it for the Synchro variant from the Legacy of Destruction set, and that is Zark. Now, this deck is one that's still built for the Synchro lineup that I had since the last update, but another one just being able to get out the big Zark boss monsters, even the one we got from Age of Overlord, is always a great Pendulum play, being the final boss for the Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc 5 series as well. And we have just a couple decks left. Now, these two, we'll do these two at the same time because they are more or less just cores that were kept in the deck boxes for the same premise of Fire Fists. I'm missing a good majority of the cards, but I don't want to forget about the decks. I feel like when I put the decks in my binders, that is when I forget about them, and that's the same with TGs and Evil. So they stay in their regarded deck boxes because one day I will fully rebuild them and, you know, keep them in the actual deck collection. We're down to 3 left, with the next one being Gustos. This one has kept a good amount of my Psychic extra deck, but another one that I always enjoy from the dual terminal storyline. So with this one definitely I would say is over the 40 card mark. I might have some extra cards here and there mixed in, so I didn't lose any of my Gusto cards, so that's why they stay together. But when I do that, I normally can put the deck, the deck together quite easily after that, and then just go from there for the cards I want to use for it. And with the last two, one that, someone let me know in the comments if we do see Meow Meow Mew off of the ban list for the Prank Kid deck. I think I even have some in here. As I say that, I make myself out a liar because there's no Meow Meow Mews with the extract. I got them around somewhere, but Prank Kids definitely could see a fun return if we do see Meow Meow Mew. And the last deck for the collection, we end on Yusei. I see some blank spots here for the extra deck cards, but I think that's just because they're also mixed in, and I don't know why they are out of their sleeves, and that's for a good majority of the cards in here also. I have some placeholder proxies for the Revolution Synchrons because we are getting them in the Megatin, so that'll be when I replace those. Otherwise, they're in the Morphtronic deck, and that's why I don't want to have too many Revolution Synchrons, because they were at one point a pretty expensive Synchro Secret as well. But that is it for the entire collection. I always like updating these videos, and it felt like since the last one, I had picked up a good number of different decks to show off in the collection as well. But as always, I always like to hear in the comment section what decks, comprise your collection. What are your favorite decks in your collection? How many, decks do you have in your collection? Let me know, definitely, in the comment section below. And as always, until next time, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and Kira Twig out.